All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Kristen Iwanechko, NERC's Director of Member Engagement, and I will be facilitating today's session. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's Q&A session with the Modernization of Standards, Processes, and Procedures Task Force. That task force, as you know, has posted a white paper in late July with potential improvement opportunities for transforming NERC's reliability standards development processes, and organize that into 3 steps: standards initiation, standards development, and balloting. Today's call will focus on questions around the balloting process step and the potential improvement opportunities that are laid out. We do have the task force on the call today to answer your questions. And before we get into it, a reminder that today's session is public and the listening audience may include members of the press, representatives of various governmental authorities, and then, of course, many industry stakeholders. And then, although this is an informal session, it is our policy to abide by NERC's antitrust compliance guidelines. If there are any questions, please contact our General Counsel, Sonia Hosha. The session is also being recorded and will be posted on NERC's YouTube channel and the MSPP Task Force webpage on the NERC website. Please feel free to enter any questions at any time to get in the queue. We will be taking questions throughout, either through the Q&A panel within WebEx or through raising your hand. So again, feel free to enter those questions at any time to get in the queue, and we will get to your questions. We will get to as many as we can. If we do not get to your question, we will be compiling all the questions and answers to post on NERC's website in the coming weeks. So before we take some questions, I will turn to Todd Hillman to provide a high-level overview of the potential improvement opportunities within the balloting process.
Thank you, Kristen. Just want a video or audio check on your end. All's good?
All good.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, listen, for those of you who had attended the last 2, this is step 3 in the installment, and I just want to thank Greg and Todd Lucas and their teams for all the work to get us to this point. The one thing everyone on the call should know is that this has been a coordinated process. So rather than trying to do things in silos, there's been a lot of coordination and discussion across all 3, and that's deliberate, right? The reason we want to do that is if we make improvements in each, then the changes we make in each can be additive to one another. And so that's a critical point as we walk you through what we're trying to work on the balloting side. The other thing I will tell you is that this is far from complete. There's not even ink yet. We're still in the pencil and paper and eraser mode within our team. And that's really important. That's why the feedback on the white paper, feedback on today's session, and anytime you have the opportunity to give us feedback, we're going to take that. That is a gift that we're certainly very, very appreciative of. A lot of times when I've been talking to folks about this, people will ask, well, is there really a problem here? Is there an issue that you guys in the balloting group are trying to solve? And so I just want to kind of start by laying out that there isn't a very high participation in balloting today. 14% participation, 1,850 registered companies, 477 voters. When you start looking at those kind of statistics and people really taking over the process, it's obvious that some realignment is needed. And so that's the kind of work. We started from a blank sheet of paper. What Greg and Todd Lucas started us out with was, listen, make sure that what are important to you as you think about the teams and think about all of the stakeholders in the process. We came up with things like it's got to be efficient, it's got to be effective, and it really has to engage everyone, right? Everybody's voice matters here. We need to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and everyone is represented as part of this process. So we think about things like a fair, simple, and trusted process. We also want to note that there were some things that worked well in the current process. And so while we started with a blank sheet of paper, we also wanted to recognize some things that did go well and try and incorporate that into the process as we go forward in terms of our recommendations. The last thing I will say is, before we get into the balloting options that we've come up with so far, is that the industry is going through transformative change. And I think we can all recognize that. So what is required in this new world that we are now operating in or trying to operate in is we need more speed, we need more simplicity, and we need more solid execution. And so when you see the types of things that we're talking about today, we also want to bring those to you with those things in mind: speed, simplicity, and solid execution. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that in the balloting area here, our goal has 3 options, although to be honest, we have spent a majority of our time on options 1 and 2. Option 3 is simply tweaking, so incremental changes to the current process, revisiting recommendations made by the Registered Ballot Body Task Force, which conducted an analysis last year. But let's talk about the first 2 options here first. The first option is to create a standard balloting body. That's really built on the principles of maintaining the integrity of voting as we see it, as well as addressing the dilution of the existing segments, and then increasing the participation by everyone within the industry. The idea is to move away from the registered ballot body and establish a standing ballot body consisting of industry representatives that would vote on and approve standards on behalf of all NERC stakeholders. Once a standard has been drafted, and I know we've gotten questions of, well, listen, if the standard is, sort of well baked and already on its way, where you've gotten significant input and participation, is balloting really needed? You still, I think, need it to ensure that you've got all the feedback from all the sectors, right? So you might have had some in the earlier processes, but what we found is some folks really don't get involved until you start getting towards the end. So this would still ensure that you get feedback, or you would provide an opportunity for all sectors to provide that feedback at this stage. After gathering that feedback, the standing ballot body representatives would cast a vote on behalf of their sectors. If approved, which is the goal here, that would be presented to the NERC board for adoption. If not, that standard would then go back to the drafting process for improvements. The other piece that you heard from Greg and Todd Lucas was this sort of, we have priorities for NERC directives and FERC directives. So urgent board initiatives from NERC as well as FERC directives, we want to try and move through much quicker. For those, there would be 1 advisory ballot from the standard ballot body, and following that, the standard would be presented to the board with results and explanations of voting positions. So think of an expedited process there, because a lot of that information, when we're getting it, is already well baked through FERC or well baked through the NERC board initiatives. This particular the option was brought up on the assumption that a significant stakeholder input would occur in the initiation and development stages. So the member representatives committee is your straw here in terms of your straw dog of what this standing ballot body would look at. We looked at a lot of different alternatives. We are certainly open to other ones. But what that does is that provides some consistency. You see all groups are represented there, including Canadian representatives, which I know was a question on a previous call. You have the opportunity to hear all voices. And I think the most important thing, and I know hopefully Brett will get into this later, he has a lot of experience in the ISO RTO world, is you then get your outliers, you then get your dissenters, and you get to hear from everyone, right? You also get to hear within your own sectors what folks are thinking about and feeling about before you get to the actual casting of your votes. So you have the ability to really elevate the level of debate within your own sector, as well as within the NERC community itself. So that's really that standard ballot body, the standing ballot body that we're talking about. We've gotten a lot of questions on weighting. While we're starting out with each sector gets 2, you could have different weightings. I know in the different ISO RTO components around the US and in North America, there's different ones, right? So there are different weightings that could be considered here in terms of the sectors, load serving entities, other things. That certainly we have examples of through the ISO RTOs and could consider here as part of the discussion. The second balloting opportunity you see there is to implement more of a notice and comment process. I know Kal Ayub from FERC is on the phone. This is the standard NOPR, or Notice to Proposed Rate Making process that they have at FERC. The goal there is to gather input, to clarify issues, and the most important thing from that is to promote transparency, right? And then refine solutions as NERC tries to fast track or get going on what they see as key issues within the FERC community. So this opportunity is on the principles of streamlining the standard process while retaining the participation and replacing the balloting with a standard comment approach. It is modeled after FERC. And once a draft standard is ready for input there, the proposal would be posted. Anyone and everyone would be able to respond to those comments. NERC teams then would provide guiding questions for pointed feedback and then analyze and draft the proposed standards based on that. Depending on the level of changes that would be made as part of that process, the proposed standard would move forward for board adoption or be put to out for comment one at a time. So again, if you're familiar with the FERC process there, it is very expedited, it is very streamlined, it is very transparent, and it really gives everyone the opportunity to provide input there. And as I said, the third thing here, we haven't spent a ton of time on. We have made sure to reflect the work done by the Registered Ballot Body Task Force. So that's sort of the base, if you will, by which we're making sure that we look at things that have worked well from a balloting perspective. But our driver here and our charter from Greg and Todd Lucas was, any and all options are on the table here. We do need some realignment. We do need some change. We have to see how we can make this process faster, simpler, and more solid. So with that, I would turn over to any of my task team members if I missed anything or they want to say yes and or add something. And then with that, Kristen, we look forward to the dialogue and the questions.
Todd, I'll just add that Todd mentioned this is basically the idea is around how the MRC works. But as Todd mentioned, if you look across the various RTOs and ISOs, the ERCOT Technical Advisory Committee, the SPP Members Committee, the MISO Advisory Committee, Ontario Strategic Technical Committee, and I think their technical panel, the PJM Liaison Committee, there's a lot of examples out there where a similar structure where the stakeholders are divided into sectors, and the sectors elect representatives that do a lot of the heavy lifting for them. So that's kind of some of the premise behind there. That is something that, whether you agree with it or not, based on your own experiences, that's well vetted across the electrical power industry. So I just wanted to add that. And this is, even though we're moving to, I think we're just using 2 representatives as a placeholder, because we talked about 1, we talked about 3, and we never got very far. So just for kind of putting together a straw man to start discussing around, we went with 2 representatives, and I think we carved out 12 to 14 segments. And there's, the point I'm making is you can go look at these other entities and how they structure their sectors. Some of them have a lot of sectors. Some of them, PJM, for example, has a small number of sectors. So we're trying to get to where we thought was the right mix. And inside of the sector, at least off the starting block, we've kind of left it to where we're going to give each sector a lot of autonomy as to how they manage the voting inside of their sector. Now, we may depart from that if we think there needs to be some uniformity or something like that. But right now, the idea is each entity will have to pick a sector to be a member of. They can't be a member of more than one sector. Those people will elect, in this case, again, our placeholder, 2 representatives that would typically be on 2-year terms that are staggered. So much like the MRC or a lot of the other NERC committees, you're elected for a 2-year term, and that position goes back up for election or re-election every other year. So that hopefully you don't have 2 people leaving at the same time. So there's some continuity built into the process. So that's just a few things I wanted to mention about the standard ballot body. The other one, the notice and comment process. The thought there was, if you file something in this process, it will be publicly available with your company's name on it. It's probably going to get good vetting by senior management because it's going to be out at a high level, and that solves some other problems. One thing that kind of, I guess, enhanced our view, if you will, is based on the surveys we got back, everybody or almost everybody loves the idea of balloting and feels that having ballots that reflect their votes and their opinions matter to them. So we probably spent more time trying to work through ballot, idea 1, as opposed to ballot idea 2, simply based on that feedback that we got from everybody in the industry. So we're a long way from deciding on anything. These are just, 3 of the areas or 3 of the options we've talked about. And as Todd mentioned, we really spent more time on the first 2. And we've got a lot of work to do, but we can't do that work effectively without getting input from everybody about what they like and what they don't like, and hopefully specifics and any ideas you may have. So that's all I wanted to add, Todd.
Thank you, Todd and Brett. Rich, anything you want to add before we jump into some questions?
Oh, I don't think I could add much to that. Those 2 did a very good job of describing everything we've done.
All right, well, great. So again, for folks listening in, please go ahead and submit any questions you have through the Q&A panel, or go ahead and raise your hand to get in the queue, and we will make our way through the questions. I think Todd and Brett, you all have answered a couple that we've received around, what a standing ballot body is, and how that might look a little bit different than what we have today, and then also around identifying the ballot body and how the task force is envisioning that the ballot body may be identified. So another question that we've got in here, Todd, you mentioned as you were providing your overview that the balloting participation rate is low, and that's part of the reason for looking at this. Has the task force looked into or found any key reasons why that the current balloting participation rate might be so low?
We started talking about a little bit of metrics for those of us. I know metrics was a discussion on Todd Lucas's discussion day before yesterday, or maybe it was yesterday. They're all running together at this point, Kristen. We haven't gotten deep in the data other than some anecdotal information. So not only is it low, it's late, right? So you have people that come in very, very late in the process and can really, by their size and general number of votes, can really take over that process. And so not only is it late and low, we're not seeing a lot of that discussion and participation. So a lot of surprises going into that. But I think NERC has a little bit of data that we've talked about and we can share. But for us, it was just in general, like, well, asking NERC and NERC teams, how difficult is this process? And they use words like it's unwielding, it takes a lot of time, multiple spreadsheets, a lot of low participation sort of in the end. And you're also getting a lot of surprises, right? It'd be one thing if the process was going so well, the people didn't vote because they just knew, oh, everybody's on board, this is a foregone conclusion. But I think way too many surprises from a voting perspective for people's liking. So we don't have firm data other than some indications that it's fairly low and not consistent. But the anecdotal stuff was really, really big for a lot of us.
Thank you, Todd. And Brett, in talking about the balloting body, I know the task force had provided some possibilities within the white paper about how that balloting body might be structured, and the suggestion there or possibility there was to combine the large and small end user groups. Can you further explain the reasoning behind combining those?
So that's just one idea we've had. One of those 2 groups in particular has not been that active during during the last, I don't know, decade or more at NERC. So that brings quorum issues and stuff like that to the table. I think I'm trying not to speak for the rest of the people on the task force or even the subcommittee. With large loads or large end users, that's going to really end up being like the large load customers and people that in typical industrial types that even today and have for the last several decades been large end users. And those from the data that I saw tend to be more active. It's the smaller users that we're trying to figure out how to get that structured right. And combining the 2 was just one idea that we've had. There's other ways that could go, obviously, and these are things that we kick out amongst the the group, the first the subgroup, then the overall task force. And we tell you guys what we're thinking about, and you can tell us if you like it or you don't, or you think it could be better if we adjust it this way or that. So that's how I would answer that question.
Thank you for that, Brett. This next question will be for Brett and Rich. It's for options 1 and 2. Can you explain and talk a little bit about how you see those options increasing industry participation? And so, Brett, if you can talk to option 1 around the standing ballot body option, and then Rich around the notice and comment process, and how you see that increasing industry participation.
Well, the first thing, I think, if you're dividing people into the right type of sectors, then by definition, there's going to be some common issues and lots of times, to some degree, some common beliefs inside of the sector. So there should be some natural synergies inside of the sector. Inside of that, you're going to have some people that are going to be more active than others. But the important thing is, when it comes time to cast a vote, that everybody in that sector gets their vote and their say. And the job of the reps is to manage all of that and to make sure that everybody's heard and they understand everybody's position. So when it comes time to cast the vote in front of the board or however it's set up, they'll be able to do it based on information that they have, not just the raw voting numbers, but let's say if there's a split in the sector and some people look at it this way and others look at it this other way, that the sector reps will be able to lay that out to the board. This is why the sector's separated on this issue, and these are kind of the one or more topics that divide them. So the idea is you're going to have some commonality in business models if you put people into sectors, and the sectors, because of the standard ballot bodies, are always going to be able to vote. That was one of the reasons we're thinking about making this change. The other kind of way to look at that is everybody will still have an opportunity to make their comments known as well as their vote. So we're really trying to link the way things are done today and the good parts of the way things are done today with a way that's probably a little better focused to get us through the approval part. I'll say this, and this is very important for everybody. One of the things the task force emphasized was trying to get everything as right as possible on the front end on step 1. That's why the standards initiation process and standard development process have some. So what we're really trying to do is be able to get off on the right steps with whatever we're talking about right off the bat, get the right people involved, the right technical expertise involved. And so hopefully by the time you get through balloting, positions will be fairly refined, and hopefully if the process works right and we get a lot of people involved on the front end, we're going to have a lot less disagreement with the final product. So that's the thought process behind it.
Yeah, and Kristen, let me just add one thing here. I think the key here for everybody is accountability, right? So if you have a sector that's really not either pulling their weight or involved, you're going to know, right? You're going to know that they are not involved, they're not spending the time. You'll also know from other sectors how passionate is Brett Node about their issues, right? So you'll be able to say of this issue, wow, these two sectors are really, really focused on it. NERC and us and others can then reach out and say, hey, what do you need here? And maybe that's where you have a technical conference, or maybe it's when, other folks get involved to try and get more information on those specific issues. So it's specific, it's actionable, but then it also creates a level of accountability I don't think we have today.
Thank you, Todd. And then, Rich, can you touch on the same question around the notice and comment process and how the task force sees that improving industry participation?
Yeah, I can. I'm going to probably repeat some of what Brett just said, but I think the key issue here, right now we go through the balloting, we get comments back, we address the comments, we reballot, we get more comments back, and then this process generally goes on until we get a passing ballot. And that can be a fairly iterative and long process depending on the issue. But the intent here, and this is completely dependent on was just previously mentioned, the standard development piece. We're going to kind of move the industry feedback at the commenting period back into the development piece, so that by the time the standard development is complete, you should have a product that the industry is pretty much behind can support or at least not oppose. And the intent here is once you get to that point in the rulemaking process, it should be pretty straightforward to post the notice of standard development, as we called it in the white paper. And that would include basically all the data we have coming up to that point, the need for the standard, the explanation of the requirements, any additional information that might be needed, to move this forward. But, just like with a NOPR, it would go out for comment, and hopefully at that point, most of them would be either supportive or there would be very few that would say, hey, this issue was not addressed earlier on. But at that point, NERC would draft the responses to comments. If there were changes needed to the standard, they could make them at that point, and then it would go on to the board for their dispensation with all that material comments included. So what we're doing here is just like what was mentioned earlier, that the intent is to get industry engagement up front early on so that we don't get to the balloting piece and get stuck in this do loop of back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and moving this out to fairly long periods of time at times. So yeah, the rulemaking procedure, I won't say it's a rubber stamp. That's not an accurate statement, but it should be a fairly smooth process if we get a good product from the standard development piece.
Thank you, Rich. And Todd, I'll turn to you for this one, and then Brett and Rich, if you have anything to add. There was a lot of conversation around having this new standard development process, creating a revised standard that has nearly 100% industry consensus on the front end. So if that's the case, why is the task force looking into and recommending changes to balloting?
Yeah, so it's not perfect. We spent a lot of time, talking about not every issue is high priority, right? So you still have some that are going to be fairly technical in nature. You still need to make sure you have a record at the end of the day where everybody comes out, right? So in theory, you can have people that are certainly on board and spent time, but for whatever reason, can come out in the end and still have the ability to surprise everybody, right? And we don't want any surprises. Thus, if it does that and it goes well, and then everyone is on the record via their sector saying, yes, we are on board just like this, it should be fairly quick. And this will actually make it quicker and simpler, right? Because if it's all fully vetted, you get to that, and it's as Rich mentioned, it can be largely a rubber stamp at this point. Everybody was in agreement on this. We've got to this development phase. Unless anybody sees any surprises, we can move this incredibly quickly versus this 90-day front, go again. That's how we get out to 3+ years on all this stuff, right? It's not one area. It's all three areas not moving in concert. So I think you still need that final accountability step from the sectors to make sure you haven't missed anything, right? The minority opinion still matters. So even if it's near 100, you may want to make sure you understand that minority view, so you can either address it or just know that we've listened, we understand the concern, but we need to move forward.
Thank you, Todd. Brett and Rich, anything to add?
Nothing from me.
Okay.
Nothing for me either.
All right, great. So, Todd, this might be back to you as well. The standing ballot body approach you mentioned is similar in some respects to the MRC. Are you able to give some insights into how the MRC sectors come to consensus, particularly for controversial issues?
I have not spent a lot of time on the MRC. I was on it briefly, so I'm probably not the best one to answer that. But I can give you examples just from sectors in general. Brett mentioned the ISOs, RTOs, and so at MISO as an example, we have a lot of experience and knowledge of knowing exactly where the sectors are. And Brett hit on something really critical, which is within the sectors themselves. A lot of times there is that churning of issues and that debate. So when you get to that sector view, it is absolutely refined, it is on point, and it is hitting the stuff that absolutely matters to them. Imagine in the white paper, I think it's 11 bodies. So imagine this 11 body group coming, and everyone knows exactly what their issues are, exactly what changes need to be made, and it's uniform. So I think that that ability to have within your own sector some of those hard conversations and elevate that level of debate, I think that's what's going to make this process really, really sing.
Thank you, Todd. Anyone else have anything to add to that one? All right. So for the next question, Brett, I will turn this one to you. With the standing ballot body, does the task force envision, how does the task force envision any impacts to the standards committee, which is currently, the standards committee membership is currently organized by segments? If there are changes to the standing ballot body, would that also have impacts on the standards committee, acknowledging that there are, other pieces to this process as well? Can you touch on that one, Brett?
Sure. And to be very clear, we haven't made any decisions about the standards committee. There's been, several different alternatives that we've looked at. I think it makes sense for the sectors to be aligned all the way through the stakeholder organization. So your MRC, your RSTC, standards committee, if we have to make any changes, I think that would be reflective possibly in all of those. Obviously, that's up to the board to decide what they want to do, but I think you want some consistency with the sectors. So I'll throw that out there as being important. Again, we haven't decided anything on the standards committee. It may have a slightly different charter going forward, or it may become the standing industry committee that's going to do all the heavy lifting technically on the front end. There's different ways for it to go, or it could very easily be kind of the same body it is today, which is a process-oriented body. If we decide that's the way we still need to go, we've looked at creating new committees and trying to do some things like that. So we've had a lot of discussion around this, but we really haven't come up with any idea. I think it's important that once we start getting the actual, start making actual decisions on all three of the pieces of the puzzle, then that's going to inform everything else as we start thinking these things further out and deeper. So we're a long way from making any decisions there.
Thank you, Brett. And just sticking with you here for a second on the more around the standing ballot body, similar to the suggestion of a stakeholder council representative needing to have their organization's executive approval to serve on it, does the task force believe that for the standing ballot body option, would the sector rep need similar approval in order to serve on that, to make sure that they're dedicating the time needed to represent their sector?
Yeah, I'm not sure how NERC would police that. My working assumption's always been if your company allows you to run for a position on some kind of committee, that you've already fully vetted it up as high as you need to vet up, and you're going to have corporate support for whatever time allocation you need. That's kind of the way that I look at it. I always think it's a good idea, particularly with the importance of reliability being foremost for all of us, and with the transition we're going through with the industry right now. I think it's important that executive management stays involved and understands the positions their company are taking on proposed standards and so forth. So I think that's important, but I'm not sure how NERC or the MSPP task force would mandate anything like that.
Yeah, let me just add, I think simplicity here will matter throughout, right? So if we get process efficiencies and the right people involved, even starting with standard initiation, I think by the time you get to balloting, you don't have a lot of big guessing that's going on. And I think that will bring a level of importance, as you see today with the MRC to the standing ballot body, right? So it's an opportunity for someone to be a sector ambassador, to work closely within the process. And as Brett said, at the end of the day, this is all about getting reliability out there, and doing it in the most efficient manner possible. So I would hope that everybody is on the same page of, how do we make this the most efficient and effective going forward? We want everybody on board with moving that in the right direction.
Thank you both. And I think we had another question here around a little bit more around the standing ballot body. But has the task force considered whether the sectors in the standing ballot body model would be required to create criteria for membership qualifications? So sort of along the same lines, would the sectors have membership qualifications and be able to deny certain memberships to an entity or anything like that? Would there be some control around that?
Yeah, great question. We've kicked that one around. The other great part about our sector is Sonia from NERC is in our meetings, and she's had some thoughts there in terms of how we might, police is the wrong word, but how we just make sure that we don't have multiple folks in multiple sectors, number one, but number two, how do we make sure that we have some standards there? And I think if I remember right, and I don't want to put Sonia on the spot, we had some preliminary thoughts on how we could do that through the standard process now by which people are approved and certified within NERC. So I think we've got a general idea of how that might work, but that there's just more to come there. I think, yes, we've had those conversations and know that that's something that we've got to tackle as part of our items going forward.
Yeah, let me just add to that real quick. I just used Todd's company as an example. MISO, I know they did, all the sectors there have developed criteria to be in their sector. Other places I've seen that kind of hardwired into like operating procedures of the tariff or something like that, where it kind of lays out, this is what you got to do to qualify. It may very well be that a lot of the stakeholders can qualify in more than one sector. Maybe they own generation, they serve load, there could be a lot of different sectors they could qualify for. The key part here is we're going to ask them saying, based on your business plan, which best suits you. So you're going to have to decide between your exactly what category you want going to go into. So for example, if you're an investor-owned utility and you do a lot of different stuff, you're going to have to decide if you want to be in the investor-owned utility sector. That's probably the best fit for them. But if they've got a big merchant generation business as well, maybe they want to be in that sector instead. The key thing is they qualify and they'll make a decision. And I think if you look at how the ISOs typically do this, they'll give you a chance to change from one sector to another one time a year typically. So you're not necessarily locked in there as long as you qualify. But the key thing here is you decide which sector best fits your business and you're in that sector. That's an important aspect of the concept.
Okay, great. This next question I will.
Hey, Kristen, did I hear Sonia trying to chime in on that one?
Yes, I was just going to say that our bylaws describe the sectors very extensively. We capture that information in our membership rosters. So if we go with sectors, which is, a possibility, right, as described in the white paper, we could use that infrastructure that's existing in order to track and make sure that, people are in the right sectors that they're members for and so on and so forth. So those definitions already exist and folks can go and take a look at our bylaws.
Thank you, Sonia. Welcome back.
Thank you, Sonia. So next question, Rich, this one will be for you. In option 3 with the incremental improvements, has the task force considered if a voting member is in multiple segments that they would need to commit to voting in a single segment that is of most interest to them to help with some of the weighting issue and not skew the results by getting multiple votes?
So we did discuss that, weighting in particular on how we would handle that. And if we were to go to option 3, which was an incremental change, we would probably take a very, very hard look at the registered ballot body work that was the registered ballot body task force work that was done last year. We did debate, we did discuss some of this because some of the same issues came up with option one. How would you weight votes, this and that? And whereas in option one, you would pick a sector, it's still kind of an open question on option three, if we would retain the current NERC approach to this, or if we would, move towards more pick one and go there. We did talk about limiting the amount of sectors based on that. And I'd like to speak more on it, but the truth is that, as we said when we opened the discussion, options 1 and 2 were the ones that we're mostly focused on, but we did look at 3. We did spend significant time on it, but it's not as well flushed out as the first 2 options. But,
yeah, and Rich brought up a great point there. We're using that as a base, right? So making sure we're taking the best from the work that was done there and seeing where we could apply that to 1 and 2 if applicable. So well said, Rich.
Thank you all. Rich, were you going to say something else?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. All right. So for the next question, I will open it up to any of you that want to answer this one. But how does the task force feel, or how do you know if you have almost 100% industry consensus at the end of that standard development phase if you don't have a ballot?
So we're not proposing to do away with the balloting process if we end up going to option number 1. Just to be very clear to everybody, there is some frustration with the way the current process works, and it's relatively inefficient, or viewed that way at least. So part of what we're trying to do here is make things more efficient. And let's see. I think. Well, I'm sorry, Todd.
No, hey Brett, this is Greg. You mind
Sure.
if I jump in?
Go right ahead, Greg.
So that's a very good question, and in the development part of this task force that we're doing, we're really working hard to try to figure that out. And while we don't necessarily are calling it balloting, we want to turn around the drafts of the standard enough where the comments that we're getting and addressing those comments, we get to a place where either the comments are minimal, and maybe we have a part of this process to where we have you indicate that you support the draft as written. So that's a piece of the puzzle that if the industry says, yeah, we like this option and would like to see it developed out further, those are the kind of things that we would bake into that process, because the goal of the development is to hand off to balloting something that has already been vetted to a point to where, from a written standard perspective, industry supports it. Now, there may be other reasons why you don't want to adopt it or something like that, but get it out of what the standard says and how the standard is written. So I hope that helps to answer the question. Sorry to jump in there, Brett.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Greg. For the next question, why has the task force perceived the current multiple balloting rounds as a negative thing? Can somebody, and I'll open this up to anybody, to share what the task force thoughts are on the current structure with the multiple balloting rounds?
Yeah, so how we got educated here, everybody, is actually NERC walked us through it, right? So NERC took us through good examples of things that have been particularly difficult, from sort of cradle to grave, if you will. And even at the end, sort of the amount of consternation left over by a few issues in particular. And as you look through that, you got to this balloting phase, and where do I begin? The complexity of it, the number of times you reset these 90-day clocks, the number of times people at the end would come in at the very, very end when you thought you were home, and then the vote all of a sudden doesn't show up with the commensurate percentages you needed, and it then goes back in the process once again. So I think the lack of transparency, the ability to take control of that in different parts of the process, and just the inefficiency by which it works, and then the amount of work I think it puts on NERC was something that was a real big eye opener for me. The amount of time and effort that they spend as part of all these different processes, it just seemed like such a waste of great talent and resources if we could make it more efficient. So at least to me, that was the stories that I was getting from actual instances from NERC experts was what really put the light bulb on for me.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that one?
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody from NERC that was walking us through some of those could just sort of hit some highlights of, sort of the, not the best practices, but the things that are really unwieldy is the word I heard a lot, and cumbersome when it came to some of those things.
Can I jump in for a second?
Anyone from NERC?
Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
Let me start by making just a few points on the number of ballots. First of all, I just want to say when we went to we have in our rules of procedure, we have an approval of 2/3 approval. Now, there's a lot of debate that can go on as to whether or not 2/3 is the right number, whether it should be majority, 50%, 60%, 65, 70. I mean, there's a lot of debate that goes back and forth on whether or not we have a good standard and whether or not 68% is that right litmus test. So I'll start with saying that number is first of all very debatable. I do know that everyone understands having a ballot and having a way of having some type of comment period is very instrumental for making sure that we have the right feedback, but it is cumbersome. First of all, I just want to say administratively, it's sometimes very hard to close the ballots. The number of people who join these ballots at the very beginning of the projects, and sometimes they trail off and don't participate. We, as an organization, have spent many closing ballot day calling individual voters to please come in and abstain if you can, because sometimes voters just lose interest in ballots. They don't want to close the ballots. Sometimes there's no comments received. So just even getting to an abstention is sometimes very difficult. High performance ballots where we do have a very large consensus on the issues, technical issues. Sometimes we do see, especially with the first ballots, that it's just a negative vote because they're not going to vote in the first one or two ballots. And we did receive significant feedback that most of the time the ballots fail on the first ballot. Just generally, they're not going to support that first ballot out of habit. So that does slow us down, create inefficiencies. And again, there's a lot of time and resources in just trying to maintain and close that ballot system. Also, I just want to reiterate that there have been several instances with regards to directives, FERC issued directives where we've had impasses with industry, and it's taking a very hard look at whether or not our process is very effective. Several of those ballots, sometimes not only do they not close, but it's made it very difficult to meet regulatory deadlines. We've had to invoke 321 twice in the last year just to get us to the point where we can get a standard filed with FERC to meet regulatory deadlines. One of the times that we did invoke 321, we could not even promise getting above a 60% ballot. We were simply at an impasse with industry. So it does sometimes feel like some of those projects are held hostage due to the ballot periods. And also, we don't have a limit on the number of ballots. So some of these projects, if you go back historically, they have taken 5 years to develop a standard, even if there's not a contentious technical issue, just based on the debate that goes back and forth before industry sometimes is willing to move a ballot forward. If you want to go back to 2007, several projects, if we count backwards, not just the virtualization project, took over 3 years. So I just want to put those numbers out there if that helps. It's
Thank
not
you
that
so
we don't
much.
support
Yeah, that's what I was
consensus.
going for. Really helpful.
Thank you, Sujin. And Sue Kelly, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate some of what Sujin said from the perspective of one, a board member, and second one, somebody who's observed the standards committee for the last couple of years. I mean, there are some times when things get drawn out. And I myself have paid a lot of attention over the years to what FERC has said about our process. A number of commissioners have noted in writing their concern about the length of time it takes to produce standards. And if Cal would like to say anything at this point, I would welcome his input.
All right, and I also see that Sonia has her hand up.
If I may, I just wanted to, I guess, from our perspective, the problem with the current balloting is that, this isn't any kind of aversion to gauging consensus or getting input, but as it's currently designed, the input often comes late, and it's not really the most efficient way to receive it. We get comments that often cancel each other, and having to make sense of it at a very late stage in the process doesn't really help anybody. If you've heard the discussions on the other two phases, standard initiation, standard development, the idea more broadly is to front load the opportunities for input and discussion. And therefore, the streamlining of the balloting makes sense in that context. And again, nothing's set in stone. This is, very much a conversation, but, you have to look at the options, I guess, in connection with each other to understand the thought process. The idea that at the very end, ballots are essentially used to almost provide red lines to the written standard is incredibly inefficient, and it's just not sustainable.
Thank you, Sonia. And Cal, I see your hand up now too. Please go ahead.
Sure. I think Sue called on me. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Cal Ayub from FERC. I always have to give my disclaimer. I'm a non-voting member of this task force. And second, I do not speak for the commission or any individual commissioner or chairman. So to Sue's question, it's very public information. The commission has in several instances actually put in orders some form of a concern that standards are, the length of the process is pretty long. And they've put that. So it's a well-known documented fact that the commission has raised questions about the speed of standards development, et cetera. So if that answers your question, Sue, absolutely. I think there's several orders where the commission has actually articulated that concern.
Thank you, Cal. And I think we've got time for one last question, and before we do some closing remarks here, but. Brett, I will start with you on this one. Urgent initiatives in response to FERC orders or board directives likely deal with some complex issues that may require substantive deliberation. Does the task force have any concerns around a single ballot, a single advisory ballot leading to, maybe not sufficient standards being passed?
Well, I think you've always got to try to guard against that. And we haven't given a tremendous amount of thought to that. So for the person that asked the questions, I would implore that you give us any ideas that you have. If you think you have a good way for us to execute on that, by all means, let us know. I know that's not really answering the question, but yeah, I think that in just looking through the Q&A on here, there's a lot of assumptions that we've thought these things through in great detail, and that's just not the case. We've tried to, from day one, to get outside of the box and think of different ways to achieve the overall goals using the principles that the board gave us. But we haven't, we've still got a lot of work to do. We're going to get hopefully a lot of feedback from the industry. Then we've got a lot more work in front of us before we present to the board early next year.
Thank you very much, Brett. And again, for everyone that asked the questions, thank you. If we did not get to your questions, we will be putting together a document capturing the questions and answers that we will post on our website in the coming weeks. So your questions will not be lost. So just to close us out here, if we can go to the next slide, as y'all know, the task force is doing a lot of engagement while the white paper is posted. We've had Q&A sessions this week. We've had a number of webinars through the regional entities or various committee meetings. So here's some upcoming engagements that are happening between now and when the public comment period closes on the white paper on August 27th. If there are any questions that you have, please always feel free to submit those to mspp@nerc.net. We are monitoring that. We'll make sure the task force receives your question. And we hope you'll continue to follow along with the effort and submit your feedback on the white paper for the task force. And so with the last few minutes that we have here, I'll just ask if Todd, Brett, and Rich have any final remarks that they'd like to make for those on the call.
Thanks for attending on a Friday, y'all. Appreciate all the work that has gone in all the way across all of the components of the task force. It is a team effort. It is a coordinated team effort. We're trying to get more efficient, more effective, and really make sure everybody's got a voice in this process. Keep the feedback coming. It is a gift truly that I think we can use here as we all move towards making this process better and continuing to keep the bulk electric system reliable. So just thanks for the time and the input, and we continue to look forward to receiving it.
Thanks, Todd. Brett, Rich?
Same to Todd, is Todd. We need the feedback. When you're giving us the feedback, please try to describe what aspects you like or what you don't like, or if you've got an idea, vet it for us and fiddle in as best you can to give it to us. So, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Great, thank you. Rich, anything to add?
Yeah, I would just ask everyone that's listened to all three sessions to keep in mind that these all flow together. You can't just address one piece and not the other two, and the success of all three of them depend on the other two being appropriate in their final process as well. So I appreciate the comments on the balloting as a way to comment or make your concerns known. Hopefully we capture that in the development piece so that when we get to the last milestone, we're not heading back to the first, which I think is really what the concern was with the balloting piece. So like I said, the comment and the development piece, that second piece of this process is really, really key to the success of any standard. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right, thank you. And thank you everybody for attending. Again, this will be recorded and posted on the website. Hope everyone has a wonderful Friday and weekend, and thank you again.